Hi folks, I'm Spencer, and on today's episode of Cult Mania, we're welcoming back one of my favourite horror movie franchises with VHS 94. For those of you who don't know, VHS 94 is the fourth instalment in the VHS franchise. It's not the 94th. This is a series that's comprised of sort of found footage anthology films, and like I said, this is the fourth one. You don't need to have seen any of the others to jump into this one. If you are interested in the rest of the franchise, I did a franchise review, which I will pop a link to up whichever side of the screen it is. But like I said, you can just dive straight in here. And really, this is being sold as a return to form after VHS Vara, which is the third film, sort of really disappointed everyone and pretty much killed the franchise dead. It's been years since that film came out. This film's been released on Shudder. I don't know whether it's getting any sort of physical release, so that's where you're going to find it for now. A sort of noticeable difference with this one is that it's period set. The 94 is that it's set in 94. And I guess is much more of a return to the roots of the original VHS, in that pretty much all of these films, bar one sort of outlier, are designed to look like they're on VHS, and like I said, they're sort of found footage style, although to varying different degrees. And yeah, I adore this franchise, and this was one of my most anticipated films of the year, so I'm very much looking forward to talking about this. I'm going to discuss the films, well, I'm going to discuss each story separately, like I did with the sort of franchise review, so let's get started. As per usual with VHS and pretty much all anthology-style horror films, we have a wraparound story, and this is that one. In this, a group of SWAT team people, a SWAT team, are sort of going on what they believe is a drugs raid. They've been sent a video of this sort of doped-out looking girl, and they're going to go and raid this place. And they've got a sort of journalist with a video camera in tow. When they get in there though, it's definitely not a drug den. It is full of TV screens and people sat in front of those TV screens who've got no eyes. And thus they sort of go around trying to find what on earth's going on. There's a twist at the end because it's an anthology thing, there's always a twist. And basically every now and again they come across a TV screen, and that's where the anthology segments come in, which is nice because Viral completely forgot that you needed to tie in how people are seeing the anthology bits. So I was very glad to see that they actually thought that bit through for this one. It reminds me the most of the first VHS's sort of wraparound, in that there's some very good tone setting, it looks quite cool, there's some very good imagery, but this does feel like a wraparound. It does feel like just the sort of connective tissue between the other stories. I do like that this one has a little bit more to do with tying actually the events of those separate stories into this sort of bigger universe. And I like that it continues something that VHS 2 did, where it gives us this sort of feeling of a world and a universe around these VHS tapes that have strange supernatural powers. But it just does feel... It doesn't feel like a massive story in and of itself. It does have an ending, which is nice, but... And like I said, there's some really good imagery, there's some good gore, but it's not... I don't, you wouldn't stitch these bits all together and have a story that I think you wanted to see again, unfortunately. So our first proper segment is portrayed as this sort of news report, or it starts as a news report, then you get the sort of raw footage, then it has an advert, then it goes back to being a news report about Ratman. Not the critter from the shitter, not that rat man. It's this sort of possibly mutant man rat thing. You know what I mean. And you start off with some quite funny little news, interviewee, a bit like at the start of Blair Witch, where they're sort of interviewing locals about the local legends that is Ratman. And then they go into the sewer to try and find Ratman. And to start with, you're like, oh, it's homeless people that live down here. Perhaps that's what it is. And then it becomes a bit more clear that there's something a bit strange going on and a bit spooky. This story is a very good one to start with because it's relatively light. It's relatively... this is quite a fun story. There is some really good gore effects and prosthetic effects. There are a lot of sort of boo haunted house jump scares. And it's sort of got... it's a nice tone setter for the rest of the stories because it's spooky but in a good fun kind of way. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It knows that it's quite a silly premise, and I like that it knows it is and sort of plays it at just the right level. Also, like I said, you get an advert partway through for this sort of home appliance that is directed by Stephen Kostansky that did Psycho Goreman and The Void, and it's just a really bizarre, funny little interlude. So no, I quite like this one. It's got the perfect place being towards the start because it's good fun. It's good sort of spooky. It's a spooky good time. And there is an effect right at the end, which is so cheesy, but it's brilliant, and I loved it. And I think that was the point where I settled in and went, I think VHS 94 is going to be alright. I will say, I have seen some people complaining online about the fact that this looks like it's shot on VHS, and I will just take a little bit of a moment to go into this. I really like that they've made these look period set 94 era crap VHS. This one is dark and it's grotty, from what I understand, because all of these were shot in lockdown and COVID conditions. And apparently they shot this in a real sewer, so it looks grimy and horrible, and I can imagine germaphobes are not going to like this, and it's quite claustrophobic as well, so be warned on that. I'm saying this is quite a fun one, but that may interrupt your fun in this. But anyone saying that you can't see what's going on, the picture quality is fine, and I really like that they actually went back to it looking like it was shot on VHS, which 2 and Viral sort of forgot about.
Hello?
This story is VHS 94's sort of spooky tale, more sort of outright supernatural, scary, slow burn. It follows a woman who has been sort of tasked with conducting this overnight wake for someone who's died in a sort of horrific accident that we don't fully understand. They've been asked to record this wake, so she sets up the cameras and waits for people to turn up. And no one turns up. So she's on her own in the sort of room with this coffin as a storm rages outside. And then the power goes and the coffin moved slightly. And you can sort of tell where this is going. This is very good in that I like that it is a slow burn that just builds up this sense of atmosphere really well, and it fakes out on you a couple of times. You're waiting for it all to kick off, and then it doesn't, and it does that really well. It doesn't outstay its welcome, and by the time it's ended, it kicks up a notch and sort of goes from being spooky to you get some gore and you get just a sort of more sort of exciting finale. Because I was worried that, it could slow down a little bit too much, but I think it sort of ramps up nicely at the end. It probably was my least favourite of the overall segment, but it still packs quite a wallop, and I think it's a lot it's quite clever. It's more clever than I think the setup makes it sound. I do think that is probably the one that's, I think, going to be quite divisive on this one, because it is that slow, but it reminds me of Second Honeymoon from the first VHS in that it's slow and it's a build-up, where this is quite a party horror film. I think releasing it for Halloween was a very good idea because it's a lot of fun, and I think perhaps this is the slowing point. But like I said, I think the ending is a lot of fun, and I think that sort of rescues the tone nicely. Now, I think this is the one that most people are probably very excited for, given that the director worked on Safe Haven from VHS 2, which is probably the most popular of all the VHS segments. This one follows a mad scientist who has started kidnapping people and started welding them into machinery to sort of create sort of cyborg super people type things. So you've got sort of Tetsuo floating around, Tokyo Gore Police, Frankenstein's Army, which is a really underrated found footage horror film, and a sort of Hardcore Henry as well, in that it's much more POV than any of the other stories, because one of your cameras, apart from a camera that is owned by a SWAT team that burst in, so you get some action, one of the cameras is inside one of the cyborg people, which is very cool. This is freaking bananas. This is clearly just people having a whale of a time coming up with insane ideas, throwing loads of practical effects, CGI effects, guns, explosions, blood, guts, everything being thrown at the screen for... This is probably the longest of all the shorts, so I think everyone knew that this was sort of the main draw. And it is chaos and really, really well done. It actually packed a bit more emotional wallop than I was expecting as well, which I'm not going to go into because I don't want to spoil anything, but there was a moment where I was actually like, somehow this has gone from being insane and mental and enjoyable to sort of having a moment where I was like, actually, this is something hitting me in the feels. But no, this, again, it's, especially after you've sort of slowed down, this is a ramp up into effects and just sheer stuff happening. This is the one, I think, if you have motion sickness, it's probably going to set people off, because it has a lot of sort of throwing people around and running around and stuff like that. And it is the only one that doesn't look like a VHS tape, which probably won't bother many people, but did bother me ever so slightly, because it was the one that didn't feel like it was set in '94, which is a shame, because I think the consistency throughout the rest was really good. But this is sure to be a crowd-pleasing segment, and it is a lot of fun. And again, some of the effects in this are great. There's some of the CGI is a little bit dodgy, but for clearly what would have been a low budget, all of these were made on low budgets. There's a lot going on here, and the sheer just sort of determination to make something great. You can see that they've done so much with so little. It's great. Now, for me, this one came out of nowhere. I was expecting the subject to be the really big one, but actually, I was really impressed with this segment. This follows a sort of right-wing Christian neo-Nazi group that are sort of living out in that sort of, out in the wilderness in a sort of compound, end of days, prepper sort of situation, and they are planning to attack a government building to sort of send their message that they're going to reclaim America and all that sort of thing. Which was, you know, this was something that, you know, if you watch like old Louis Theroux documentaries, there's an episode that's very similar to a lot of the stuff going on in this. But it starts out very much like that's where the horror is coming from these sort of horrible, sort of, like I said, neo-Nazi sort of characters, and you sort of introduce it and they execute this guy. But then slowly you become aware that there's something supernatural going on, and I'm not going to spoil any more than that, but this one, I really like that it was political, and I think it does a really good job of tying in stuff that was happening, like I said, in the 90s. There's sort of allusions to Waco, and like I said, that sort of prepper lifestyle that was becoming a big thing. And it still feels really relevant with all these sort of Trump nutters and that sort of paranoia in America. So it still feels very, it feels very grounded. It feels like it could be taking place now. And just the way it went, really, this kept me guessing. A lot of the others, you sort of guess sort of where they're going, and it's sort of a fun, like, yes, got it right. This one just kept me on my toes of like, hang on, where do we go? What? Is this happening? No, wait, this is happening. And I just really enjoyed it. This one goes aggressive on VHS effect, just to say. But I really like it, and I think it does a really good job because it manages to balance its characters are all horrible people that you won't like, and it manages to make them sort of scary and poke fun at them. I think it's that thing of like, it sort of shows that they're stupid, but almost that their stupidity makes them scary. And I liked that. I think it deals with its subject matter really, really well. And yeah, has loads of surprises. This might be my favourite segment, and I was sure it was going to be the subject, but this really took me by surprise. And this one ties in the most obviously with the overarching narrative, which is interesting. And yeah, this was just a really, really nice surprise.
Compression technology, the Veggie Masher turns your vegetables into a tasty, mouth-watering paste.
As you can tell, I was really, really impressed with VHS 94. I think this is probably, whether it's the best VHS, I'm not 100% sure yet, because I've seen all the other ones multiple times. This has got to stand up to multiple rewatch. It's definitely the most consistent though, because there wasn't a story that I was disappointed with. Even the wraparound, which isn't amazing, gets away with it probably because it is just the connective tissue between them. And I do like that it ties all the other stories. There's more to tying them together than some of the others have done. I did like that. I just was really, really pleased. Like I said, it's a lot of fun. At no point, even when it gets into sort of heavier political territory, like in Terror, it still manages to be fun. This is a perfect Halloween party film because you've got a bit of everything. You've got spooky, you've got jumps, you've got gore, you've got insane stuff. There's just something for any horror fan, really. I really like the VHS aesthetic. I think it is a slight shame that the subject doesn't fit the aesthetic quite so much. I like that there is a score by Greg Anderson from Sun, which you won't notice, but I think you'd really miss it if it wasn't there, because it's just this sort of droning, horrid ambience, which I think these films have always done quite well. They've used music very well, because I think it's a difficult one with found footage because you shouldn't really have music, but that's a whole other discussion. So no, I was just really pleased. I adore the VHS franchise, and I think it doesn't get enough love, and I think this really was a great welcome back. I enjoyed all of the stories. I really hope we get another one. Hopefully this does well on Shudder and they'll greenlight another one perhaps for next year, where they can go a little bit bigger because they perhaps won't have the COVID restrictions. Although I think it's worked really well. I think the small scale, I've read that they filmed stuff in, they converted hotel rooms into sets, and like I said, they filmed in storm drains. It's just really good sort of low budget guerrilla filmmaking horror, and no, I think we needed a lot of the horror that I've watched this year. It's been quite depressing. I think to have something really quite fun really was nice, and yeah, I'm so glad to have VHS back. But that is just my opinion. What have you thought of VHS 94? Is it up there for you with the best of the franchise, or has it just failed to live up to expectations? Let me know down in the comments. Like and subscribe so you don't miss any more videos, and I shall see you next time.